Guys, Mason, how are you doing today? You still jet lagged?
I am still jet lagged. I am still getting over whatever illness I caught on the plane back from Japan, but back in the States, business was crushing it while I was gone, and excited to get to today's episode, which was really, really great.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I enjoyed interviewing Kate, and I mean, selfishly provided a lot of good advice for us and me personally and my brand and everything that we're working on. So tell us a little bit about who we have on the show today.
Yeah, we had the pleasure of interviewing Kate Sybilrud, who is a content coach for Pineda Media, and that's Ryan Pineda's company within the wealthy creator sect of his business. So Kate is a mom of two girls, and she is passionate about personal branding, social media, personal development, her faith, and creating a lasting impact in the lives of others. Kate gives a ton of valuable insights in what it takes to get personal, making both myself and Dan a little uncomfortable asking us some pretty personal questions as she gave us strategy recommendations. And if you are in the world of content creation or podcasting or just trying to create your own personal brand in your business, this is the episode for you. So let's bring Kate in. All right, Kate, how are you doing today?
I'm great. How are you guys doing?
We're doing great. We both actually went to Japan together and got back about a week ago, and I'm still getting over a cold, so Dan might do a little bit more talking today. That's why my voice sounds this way. But Kate, I want to jump right into it. You've got a really cool story and you're in a really cool position, but I think just with your role in your current company, working with content creators, I believe that building the art of a brand is centralized around effective storytelling. For yourself or clients you've worked with, what's the best story you've ever heard?
Wow, what a great question. What's the best story I've ever heard? You're really making me think right off the bat. This is what I'll say about stories, because I don't know if I can think of a story, a specific one, but I can tell you the best stories and the most engaging are the most vulnerable and raw. So when people share their flaws, their insecurities, their failures, their setbacks, those are the best because it's just people can connect to that, right? So I always encourage my clients to not be afraid to share what they're afraid to share, because that's usually what connects you to your people.
Absolutely. And I love asking the hard-hitting questions right off the bat to make people uncomfortable or get the conversation going. But no, I think that's, you're welcome, right? I think that's a fantastic answer. And I think that whenever you can see that authenticity or vulnerability with someone, it makes them personable and relatable. And I know that you just wrapped up at WealthCon, which is, an event that I went to about a year ago, and it looked like a ton of fun this time. Were there any on-stage presence that gave like an amazing story that you feel like yourself and the audience just were blown away by or really connected to?
Absolutely. It was the first time that I had heard, I want to pronounce his last name correctly because I feel like I keep screwing this up. His name is Nick, and I'm going to look up his last name here. Just try to get it right. Nick, I still probably won't. Santo Nastaso. Have you seen him? He has the one arm, and so he has no legs and just one arm. And this guy was incredible. I mean, people were in tears. Like, grown men were truly transformed from his speaking. I mean, he was such a powerful presence. It was really beautiful to watch. But he basically took the audience through this exercise where they had to essentially see themselves as a child. So like kind of facing like their their inner child, I guess you would say. But the way that he took you through that process and just got you to think differently about how you were living your life was really powerful. So I definitely say he was like, I heard the most feedback about, his keynote for sure.
Wow.
Yeah, I heard him on somebody's podcast years ago, and for anyone that hasn't, I highly recommend looking him up and listening to some of his content, because it certainly gives you some perspective hearing from him, but also he's an exceptional speaker himself. So I can imagine seeing him in person could be life-changing. So
it truly was. He was phenomenal.
Yeah. Okay. So given that, Kate, let's back up a little bit and talk about how you got to the point of being a content coach for Pineda Media, because I'm sure everyone listening has heard of Ryan Pineda and Wealthy World and his whole ecosystem he's built. I'm sure there are no shortage of resumes showing up. How'd you get where you are today?
Yeah, that's actually a great story. So I started with Ryan in sales. So I was selling our Pineda Media packages at the time. So we were doing editing and filming for our clients. So I was not a coach at that time. I was just on the sales side. I'm also a real estate agent. So that is, I guess, how I got in. And then what ended up happening is I would sell, and all of the people I sold to would come back to me for coaching. So, because the sales call, it's kind of a coaching call in a way, right? To some degree. And yeah, they just kept coming back. And so we realized, okay, this is actually my calling, I guess you could say. And this is where I need to be. And I've been able to, help a lot of our clients that way. And it's been really cool. But it was really just, I honestly feel like God just orchestrated the whole thing, because it didn't really make sense. It's not like I went into it and said, this is what I'm going to do, right? Like, I always loved marketing. And that's how I built my real estate business, was through my Instagram. And so I was passionate about it, but I certainly didn't, that wasn't the plan. But it was meant to be.
Sure. No, that's what it sounds like. If they were coming back to you for coaching, even though that wasn't your role initially, that's certainly says something. So given that, and being that you're both an agent and a content coach, how do you juggle both of those things at once? Can you tell us a little more about that? Because that's a lot to manage.
Yeah, so I don't juggle them at once. So I have stepped away from being active as a real estate agent. I still am licensed. I refer my business out. So I have like a handful of really great agents that I work with. And then I just, get the referral fee. And I do this full time with Ryan.
That's great, and it's awesome that you can just focus on that one role. And Kate, your Instagram handle is Kate Sells Vegas. So yeah. I think and we'll start transitioning into like content creation and building a brand and everything in just a minute. But do you feel like your brand is Kate Sells Vegas for your personal brand? And do you feel like there was any confusion in the continuity of, moving from the realtor into the content coach with that? Or maybe talk a little bit about your personal brand, your Instagram handle.
Yeah, absolutely. So I did feel like that. I was like, okay, I need to change this to Kate Sells Social or something, instead of Kate Sells Vegas. But that brand is so recognizable now. I mean, people literally call me Kate Sells Vegas instead of my, name, Kate Sybilrud. They just say Kate Sells Vegas. So I'm like, okay, at this point, I can't change it because everybody knows me as Kate Sells Vegas. So yeah, I just ended up keeping it that way. But I think about that often, like, is this going to be confusing for people, But again, it's already now so recognizable that I feel like I can't change it. It's like, it's a part of me. As far as my personal brand goes, what I strive to convey through my content is just embracing your uniqueness and showcasing who you really are to connect online just as you would in person. So I think that a lot of people struggle to show up authentically. Like, we hear this all the time, right? But they really do. They have a hard time with that. And usually what is holding them back is they think they have to have this high production quality, these edits, this studio and all this stuff in order to create. And so it stops them from getting started, or they start and then they're not consistent. And really, if they just take a moment to ask themselves, who am I trying to help and why do I want to help them? And then just share. I mean, everyone has a phone, everyone has a camera. So just share and connect and serve. If that's your focus, then you will create a community and you will do very well. But people get stuck in the weeds of all of the nonsense, and you just don't need to. Just tap into who you are and serve others, and you'll do well.
Absolutely. And I think, Kate, you did an excellent job just summarizing the approach that people need to have in order to be successful in this space, and to try and reiterate and summarize it even more. If you're your vulnerable, authentic self and you have something good and useful to say, I think that's one of the most important thing about content creation is you actually have to have content. You can't just go on and ramble about random things. Get a phone, and that's enough to start putting content out there. That's something that Dan and I really started with this podcast of, we're recording in our own home offices. We're not in the cool, background in the cool studio. We're doing it on webcams, and we have Kate Sybilrud on the podcast right now. A freaking icon. Kate Sells Vegas is on the podcast, and all these great stars that we've actually had on the show as well. It's been really cool to see. And then I think something else that you kind of alluded to is, whenever you're being your authentic self, you're not going to appeal to everyone. You're faith driven, you're a mom, and that is going to inspire a lot of Christian moms, which is a huge portion of the population. You don't need to appeal to every single person out there, but I think that's awesome. And it's just a constant reminder of, don't get caught in the weeds, just get out there and create. But Kate, whenever you have a client come to you, and kind of where I want to shift the episode to, what does that process look like of, is it a coaching program? Is it more like a consulting agreement? Whenever you are having a face-to-face, say Dan and I are going to have a meeting with you about one of our companies we own together. Where does it start? What does that look like?
Yeah, great question. So I want to just address one thing that you said previously about how when you show up authentically, you're going to repel some people. Not everyone's going to like you, right? And that's exactly what we want. So the way that you're being authentic is that some people don't like you. That's how you know. If you're in the middle and you're playing it safe, then you're not really connecting, is really how we look at it. So if you want to have super fans and really create massive impact, you have to lean into that, lean into exactly who you are. And then you will attract that. That's what Ryan does so well. So I just wanted to address that because I was thinking about it when you said that. And then as far as how I start to help clients, the focus for me is the personal brand. So taking who you are and what you value as as Mason, as Dan, and then in your business. So merging the business and the personal values together is where we start. So we have, I'll ask you a lot of different questions about who you are and what you care about. One of my favorite questions to ask, so I'll just ask you both this right now, is if you were to die tomorrow, what would people say at your funeral?
Is that rhetorical, or is this our opportunity to answer?
This is your opportunity to answer. What do you think they would say? What kind of impact would you have had on the world?
He couldn't sit still. I don't know.
No, I think in general, like, that he has a generosity of spirit and that he seeks to give and likes to have a lot of fun. I attempt to be the exact same person I am, whether it's in front of my wife or my fraternity brothers from college or investors that I'm pitching to on $1 million deal. I'm the same goofy guy. So I think, something along those lines without getting, too, but
Yeah, it's an interesting question. So you're saying you're goofy and fun, right? Like that's like what I'm hearing, and that you're generous.
yeah.
Okay. Are you a dad?
To 2 golden retrievers.
Okay. So
So not quite. Yeah, I do.
You do. Let's say you did have a family. Like, what kind of father would you be? This is what we do. We go like deep like this.
Oh yeah. No, I love it. Yeah, I think I would be the kind of dad that devotes as much time as possible to my kids' development and growth and fun. I think play is an integral part of a child's life, and I'd want to be a really fun dad.
I love that. And that's why you're probably building the foundation too, right now with your career and your financial success so that you can be set up for when you start a family, I imagine.
Absolutely.
I love that. Okay. All right, Dan, what about you?
See, now you've got me. See, because I don't share anything personal publicly at all. And publicly, you don't see any part. What'd you say?
So you're my favorite kind of.
Oh, no. Now I'm uncomfortable because people do not know me at all. So I guess it really depends because, my family and close friends know a very different version of me than anyone who knows me through business and isn't also a personal friend. So it depends who you ask, I guess.
I'm curious, why is that?
I don't really have a good answer for you because I've never, ever wanted to share anything personal publicly. I don't know. I guess I'd have to think about that.
Yeah, that is interesting. I would explore that a little bit. But this is what I love about these conversations is there are a lot of people like you, Dan, that don't want to share that personal stuff, right? But then they do see that, okay, the future is like, have you heard that saying, like, attention is the new currency?
Yeah, definitely.
So it's like, okay, well, how do I get the most attention? And again, like, you can create all this content, you can have all these podcasts, but if you don't get personal and people only know the professional Dan, it can only go so far, right? It's the real, like, what I saw at WealthCon and what I see at every WealthCon with Ryan, and I don't know if you experienced this because you were at the one in Hollywood, but people come up to him and they tell him, like, you've changed my life. Like, thank you. Thank you for being so bold in your faith. Like, thank you for leading, and sharing what you actually care about, even if it's controversial, because it's allowed me to feel like I could do the same. And like, when you see that, it's like, I don't even know. You just like feel it, It's cool. But the only way you get that is by going like layers deep, right? Which is hard. It's hard at first.
Oh, yeah. Well, and in an effort to not have you and I turn it into a therapy session for Dan and have him start sweating on the camera and everything. But it's I think it's just like with everything it's the environment that we grew up in. It's our parents and, what we're accustomed to. I was, being an executive in healthcare, like I would share my personal stories, like very like hardcore, like personal stories. I worked in a behavioral health hospital and my family is very, has very significant personal experience with behavioral health issues and getting used to telling that in front of hundreds of people all the time. It forces you to be vulnerable and intimate. And then you get those connections of, oh, if the CEO can say this kind of stuff and be intimate, then why can't I? And I think Dan is a very, very authentic person. He's one of the few people in the world that I would choose to do business with. And he is very similar. He is extremely honest. I don't know what his tattoo means, but I do feel like I know Dan very well. And so I guess, Kate, to kind of follow along this, you get to know the person, you get to know the business as well, and you try and align these mission and vision and values and everything to create a brand. Like what does that work look like? Of how much of it is on you and how much of it is on your client? Like, is it like, hey, I'm going to give you the answer and then you create this for me? Or what does that kind of work like?
So it's very much, it's very collaborative, and it's getting uncomfortable. Like, Dan and I just demonstrated, and having that conversation of, back and forth. But granted, we're not, we're not on a podcast when we're doing that, right? It's private. And so I think I'm very good at allowing someone to feel safe, to kind of open up, and then we can kind of dissect the story in that process, and then figure out, okay, well, what part of this really needs to be shared? What part of this is going to inspire people and connect them to your mission, like with all of it, your professional and personal. So we kind of it's a lot of questions back and forth, right? Then when we can get clear on what are your brand pillars, so like what are the top 3 things that we're going to talk about? Then that's where we will start to come up with ideas on content you can create. And so I'll help you with the ideas, but then you're going to deliver that in your way. We're not going to script. We're going to say, okay, you're going to share about, maybe it's an experience you had with, or your story, for instance, Mason, when you invested $5,000 into, a program or whatever, talking about why you invested, if that was scary, or what your feelings were in that moment, but then the outcome afterwards, and just kind of sharing that story. Like, and so that's the process. It's a lot of initially, it can just be a lot of getting to know you. And then it's, okay, I know you, this is what we're going to share with the world. This is the structure. And then let's come up with these different stories that they're just your life experiences. And then we share those. And, that's kind of the process.
Yeah.
I can
know that. And yeah, no, that makes a lot of sense. And I think it, really follows a script that makes sense and makes it repeatable. A question I have, since you're in the world, and I'm sure you follow the Hormozy family, and you consume some of the Alex Hormozy content. Something that Alex Hormozy talks about a lot whenever they're looking at purchasing a company is they're making sure it's not like a personal company it's at, Kate Sells Vegas is the brand they're trying to buy. It's the company that, creates all the content and that sort of thing. Sure. Whenever you are looking at working with a client that has like a decent sized business or a decent sized operation, how do you kind of balance that creation of the personal brand versus like the creation of the business's brand? So where it's like, if Dan and I are building a company that eventually we're wanting to sell or something like that, we don't want to make it so where it's entirely dependent on Mason and Dan. It's more the company.
Sure. So I think that's where, okay, like let's look at Ryan, for instance. So you have Ryan Pineda, and then he has several different companies, right? He'll share about the different companies, but then those different companies have their own, brand as well. So I think it's just, I don't know if I'm answering the question right, but you're going to share about whatever you have going on, but then that business is going to be its own separate thing. So they're weaved together, but also separate, if that makes sense. So It's not like
Yeah.
the company isn't only intertwined into your personal brand. It also has its own presence.
Absolutely. Well, and I think it, kind of along those ideas of it's like what you specifically are an expert in, what your rare and valuable skill is taking a person and taking a company and kind of aligning the brands and taking their personal brand to the next level is versus like, hey, this is a, you're trying to build this separate one-off brand for the company for something like that, if I'm understanding.
Yeah, and I don't want you, it's like we don't want to attach you I don't want your identity to be in the company, because then what happens, if you sell the company, then nobody cares about you anymore. Like we focus on building you so that way you can sell anything and people, they'll buy it. They don't even need to know. Like they trust you and like you so much that whatever Mason does, I'm in.
I like that, because then it's the umbrella that kind of solves any and other endeavor or business you might want to pursue or build. So that makes sense. So I've been sitting here thinking about the exercise we just went through and kind of clarifying why, right? Why am I uncomfortable? And so the company Mason and I referenced that we're building, Ground Up Partners, is a capital provider for land deals. So he and I have both been in the land space for quite a while now, and everyone in the space has the same problem of not being able to find capital for deals. I mean, even at outrageous interest rates, it almost doesn't exist. And so we're doing something Ryan's done many times and just solving a problem in our own business. But how do you think about balancing the professionalism that comes with a business like this, where we're approaching big investors, raising a lot of money, and not sharing too much of your goofy personal self online? Do you see what I'm saying? Because when I said Mason SpongeBob memes, I'm not going to share that side of me online, right? And so how do you think about being authentic but not, I don't know, I feel like there's some level of professionalism you have to maintain online to build something like what we're working to build?
Sure. So, so do you believe that Ryan has been able to raise a lot of money?
Totally. Yes.
And he has like different color hair, depending on the day.
Sure.
He talks about one of his most popular videos. I think he was talking about how he used to eat an egg McMuffin every morning before school. Like, I mean, his stuff is all over the place with as far as sharing who he is. He's still been wildly successful. So I think that's what we initially think, is we can't go there because then we won't be seen as the maybe authority, or we won't be seen as credible. But you're a human being, and who's to say that the guy, that you could raise a lot of money from doesn't love SpongeBob too?
Yeah. Yeah.
Maybe that would get you more money.
Yeah. No, point taken. I think that I was thinking about what she said and what you asked, and so that was one thing that came to mind. But okay, on a more tactical level, I wanted to mention too to the audience your whole point about not needing to appeal to everyone and being clear about yourself and your values and beliefs. I would read 1,000 True Fans. I always forget who wrote this, but that's a great article that illustrates the point. I don't know if you're familiar with that, Kate.
I feel like I've heard of this.
Tim Ferriss always recommends it, but he didn't write it, and I forget who wrote it.
Okay. So tell me, refresh my memory on what this concept is.
The moral of it is to build a sustainable business, you only need 1,000 loyal customers, followers, to build a sustainable business. And he uses a real example in that article. It's like Kevin Kelly or one of those guys that Tim Ferriss has on the show all the time. But it makes a great point. It really highlights what you're saying about you don't need the whole world to like you. You can just have a really solid following that's engaged and buys whatever product you are, whether you're an artist or an investor or whatever it might be. And that can be plenty sustainable for building a business.
Absolutely. So we talk about that a lot. You know, a lot of people will focus on virality. You know, it's like, okay, well, what can I make that's going to get me the most views? And, you know, they can get distracted by that. That is never our focus. We are never trying to get you the most views. Like, because there's a lot of different things you can do to get a lot of views. We are trying to get you the right people, you know, so that it can help your business, right? But then also be aligned with who you are, and your core values and your personal mission statement. So that is, yeah, I completely agree. That you don't need, you don't need a bunch of followers. You just need the right followers.
Absolutely. So to that end, kind of a corollary to that whole point, one thing we wanted to ask is, what are some of the biggest mistakes you see people do with content production when it comes to building a personal brand? And it sounds like being too vanilla is one of them. But beyond that, is there anything else that comes to mind that you see people repeatedly do that's a big no-no?
Well, yeah, we hear it all the time, consistency. So people get, I mean, like the fact that you guys have 50 episodes, I think you said, that's like amazing. So, you know, great job. Like, because a lot of people don't make it that far. So I think that's fantastic. But so yeah, committing to a plan that you can stick to. So if you start off and you're posting 2 posts a day, but then you can't sustain that, then that's not going to be good, right? So developing a plan that makes sense for you, and then doing whatever it takes to follow through on that plan. You know, don't just say, okay, I want to do this and then give up on it. And that's why it's so important to start with really the purpose behind what you're doing. And like, if you're making this about you and you alone, then you're going to fail. You need to have a deeper purpose of why you're doing this. And it's the long game. This isn't just, I'm going to do this for a while and that's it. No, this is you consistently showing up to serve and to help others, you know, and just, again, like doing whatever it takes and keeping that going. So I think the consistency is big. And then, yeah, getting stuck in the mess of, oh, well, I don't have this, so I'm not going to do this. Or, you know, so many people would not start a podcast like you guys have done right now because they didn't have a studio or they didn't have a team. Like people say that to us a lot. Like, well, Ryan can do that because he has a whole team. Well, Ryan didn't always have a whole team. You know, there was a time when his wife would record him, you know, or he would just record himself. So like you have to show up when no one's watching. You know, you have to show up when you have 0 followers. And if you can do that and keep going, then you'll have, you know, you will build a community.
Kate, there's like
a lot of people aren't willing to do that.
Yeah, there's like 4 different points I'm trying to bookmark there because everyone listened to the last 90, 120 seconds again because you made a lot of good points. So to your point about not having a studio, everything I have started, it did not feel like the right time when I started. I didn't feel like I was ready. I was incredibly uncomfortable. When Mason and I started Ground Up Partners, we started this podcast. I bought my first duplex. I mean, everything was incredibly uncomfortable and I didn't feel ready or prepared. So good point there. Number 2, starting this podcast, when we started it, I remember thinking it was going to take years before we'd get anything out of it. I can't believe it, but we get organic leads for our businesses from this show. And it's amazing. So that's been great. And your point about being able to work at things that don't pay off immediately, all of the things that have been most impactful for me didn't really have any impact at first. And I worked at them for years, or investments I made 6 years ago, right? Buildings I'm buying now. I don't really expect a huge return for years, but they tend to pay off very exponentially down the road. And so that tends to be all the biggest things require the longest period of working with little to no return. So anyway, several great points there, but I'll pause.
Yeah, I completely agree. Yeah. It's the discipline to show up, and put in that work before you see the results, just like anything else.
Yeah. Absolutely. And I mean, for those of y'all that have been following along for, the last 50 some odd episodes, you've seen Dan and I have gotten better with our flow. Dan got a better camera after like 30 episodes. He was recording on like a Nokia phone or something like that before. But beyond that, Kate, like within the personal brand world, there's a lot of different steps within the pipeline, let's call it, from analyzing someone's current brand to executing on a great personal brand. Within the general market of services out there or coaching out there, where do you feel like the biggest gap or the biggest opportunity is for someone like yourself or an expert in content creation and personal branding to really like niche down and execute?
It's really niche down and execute. Ask me that in a little bit different way so I can give you a good answer.
So like we kind of started with like the analysis of myself or Dan. And then we moved into, determining kind of the mission and values of the company of like, there's a lot of analysis. And then we didn't spend too much time on the actual like content that you're needing to put out there and creating that kind of thing. But I guess what I'm asking is like, if you were to break your process down of creating a personal brand and content strategy for someone into all these different phases, do you feel like there's a bigger gap at one level within just kind of the general market out there? Because I know you and Pineda Media do a ton and Wealthy Creator does a ton, and it's kind of a full service. But, I've gotten a quote for someone establishing a personal brand for me, and it blew me away how much it was going to cost. It was multiple six figures to create a personal brand for myself.
So I guess this is what, if we kind of, go into this a little bit more. So what do you feel with your personal brand? What do you feel like? Why were you seeking help in that area? Or what do you feel like is the struggle for you?
I am a firm believer, if I'm not an expert in something, I hire an expert to do it for me. Okay.
And I think that's great.
So I like beyond like, I don't even have a personal Instagram or anything like that. Like, beyond posting like fraternity pics whenever I was in college and everything, like I don't know how to do anything on social media. So I just kind of copy what Dan does and
which isn't good.
Rebrand it myself. Yeah, which isn't good.
And forgive me that I don't know all of this. I should have done a little bit more research. But so neither one of you have like personal pages.
Dan does.
Okay, Dan does, but you don't. Okay, so it's just like
and then I've got a few thousand people on LinkedIn. So like LinkedIn is like my go-to platform.
And LinkedIn is great. Well, I think that really this is the biggest opportunity, is that initial phase. Because I mean, even like you guys, you have this fantastic podcast, right? But it's mind-blowing to me that you do not have your own Instagram. I mean, at this stage, right? You've done 50 episodes, but Mason does. I can't go look at just Mason and like, oh, I loved listening to his podcast. I want to learn more about him. I want to see those 2 dogs that he referenced, Like, I want to see the funny SpongeBob memes. Like, I want to get to know his personality. People are nosy. They want to know more about you. And when they like you, they want to do more business with you. That's just the way it is.
Oh, yeah.
But so many people, this is the barrier, is that it's just getting more personal. That's the biggest barrier. In my
and it makes sense. I've used LinkedIn pretty consistently for I guess like a decade-ish now, and then I've had my Facebook since I was 11 or whenever it came out.
Yeah.
But yeah, no, I got rid of my Instagram after college. Dan just turned 28, and then I am 29.
Okay. And I just turned 28. I just turned 37.
Oh. Still our 40 under's our age. That's how I think of it.
I like it. Go with that.
Yep.
So I don't know if I answered the question well, but like, I think that really that's the hardest part, honestly, is just like figuring out how to get people to show up in that way. as themselves. And then once because you have to do that first before you can, I mean, like, I don't know. I don't know what this quote was that you got and what exactly they were going to all do, but it's like, before you can just show up, how can we even develop this personal brand? Like, we need you to first, like what Dan was saying, do the uncomfortable stuff. And like, you're going to kind of figure things out as you go, but do that first and then work on perfecting that on another level.
Oh yeah. And that makes total sense. And, I do try to attempt, not being defensive or anything. I do try to have an online presence within LinkedIn and Facebook and, through the podcast and everything. It's just Instagram was something I never fully embraced after college.
You don't, because LinkedIn, is it just, you're just doing a written post? Or?
Well, I do written posts. I share reels and clips from the podcast. Okay. We have a podcast manager that manages our podcast Instagram account and that sort of thing. Like, I have no shame. Like, I was born without a shame bone. So it's nothing like, I will tell the most deep and intimate and personal stories on a stage in front of thousands of people, and it doesn't make me uncomfortable. Yeah. I did have uncomfortable social experiences while in Japan, but that's for another time. But, wait, did you ask what happened?
No, I said that might be for another episode.
Oh, okay. I heard that and I was like, okay, well, actually, if anyone wants to hear, no, I'm kidding. But yeah, no, you're absolutely right, and I think it emphasizes and reiterates the point that we've been really trying to make, that so many of you guys can take, is just get started with something. Like, it doesn't matter if it's like a super high quality post or, the best camera or the best microphone or, anything like that. My mom always said I had the face for radio, and, that's why we're here. That's why we're on a podcast that gets more Spotify listens than YouTube, but, just get started with something. And it's easier for someone like Kate to come in, and correct me if I'm wrong or if I misunderstood. It's easier for you to come in and see what someone has and improve upon it as versus build something from scratch.
Yes, I would say this is so Justin Barry and I talk about this a lot. Justin is, Ryan's producer. And what usually happens is we think that our value and what people are going to love about us is one thing. But what will happen is you will start to share that, and then you'll share other things, because we will encourage you to kind of like try different things in the beginning, and you will be surprised at what resonates with people. Like, it's typically things that you wouldn't think people would engage with, right? More times than not. So yeah, it's really interesting. Like, it's better if you kind of throw some things out there. I don't know if I'm answering this correctly or it's getting confusing, but like, you kind of have to just dive in and try things. And then based on the feedback, right, and the data that we have, then we can see like, okay, this is like, we can see that in the numbers. This is what I feel most comfortable speaking about. And when you can get those two things lined up, then that's where things really take off. And then you can refine and, do that. But it's really just that initial, putting it out there.
Oh yeah. Well, and no, I think you made a lot of great points there. And I think it makes a lot of sense. And, to relate everything to myself, because that's what we do as humans, me, I just want to talk about myself all the time. Sure. It was so much easier in my career in healthcare administration, going into a hospital and identifying the problems and solving them, than it was starting a business from scratch. Because at least you have an idea of, okay, here's what it looks like in an ideal state. This is what its current state is. Okay, here's the gap right here. So this is the strategy, and now I just need to execute on the strategy. As versus starting something from scratch, where you need to get that feedback loop. Like Dan, I don't think we've barely looked at the statistics on this show and what our listenership is, because we're not interested. We're hitting a year this summer, and once we hit a year, I think we'll probably dive into the analytics a little bit more and see, okay, what did well, what didn't do well. But I know, Dan, like some of your best reels have been like, like bailing your contractor out of jail and stuff like that.
Yeah.
See, so it's the more personal stuff, right?
Sure. No, and that's definitely true with my posts in general.
Yeah. See, yeah. I know that's how us humans are. We like to know all the, the drama, right?
Sure. Yeah, no, personal stories well told capture attention and build brands, I think. Right. Yeah. So absolutely. Awesome. Well, as we work our way to the end of the show here, Kate, is there anything that you would have loved to have talked about that we haven't brought up, or questions we should have asked that we didn't?
Oh gosh. Well, I could podcast for hours and hours. So we could probably cover many other questions, but no, I can't think of one off the top of my head. I would love to. I'm very excited to kind of dive deeper into you both and your presence online and see, just learn more about you guys. And I hope that you'll start sharing more about your, the personal side.
Oh yeah, Dan.
Well, I will say, Kate, my posts are terrible, but I have consistently posted for years. And it's crazy how much has come from that, from investors to deals to fund, deals to partner on, all kinds of things. So it has been very useful because there's, like you said, or I think you said this earlier, where there's a lot of people who are looking at it but aren't commenting or liking it. And then years down the road, they reach out to you and they were just using it as a way to see, oh, this person is legitimate. They've been doing deals for the last 5 years. And I see that by all the HUDs they post online, So it has been tremendously valuable. And I know my posts are not good. So.
Well, I think that what you guys do well, though, and this is what many people struggle with, is just showing up and sticking with the process. So I actually kind of like what you said about, hey, we're coming up on a year. We've just been focused on executing, right? Not analyzing and shifting. And so I think that's good because that's you have to fall in love with the process. And then, you can refine later. But if if you're just focused on, the result right away, that's not usually going to keep you going. So the fact that you guys just show up and and even you say your posts are terrible, but people can see that you're showing up. Like it's been years, right? So then they trust you because you've had that presence, even if it's not maybe the best presence, right?
Yeah. Lead versus lag measures. Focus on the lead measures.
There it is. And yeah, I mean, this podcast, for those of y'all that are our loyal listeners, thank you, Mom and Mrs. Habercost. We've generated 6 and 7 figures of revenue in our businesses from investors from this podcast, of very high level people. So we are very grateful for our guests and, what value you guys bring to the show. Great guests like you, Kate, and for our listeners, for listening and following along. But Kate, if people want to find out more about you, where can they look?
Yeah, so you can find me on Instagram at Kate Sells Vegas. That's probably the best way to get in touch with me. Send me a DM, and that's how we can get in touch. Yeah, I'd love to connect. I love connecting with people. I believe in relationships, and that's what drives everything in our lives. So, and I think that people miss the opportunity to build these amazing relationships online, and it's a huge missed opportunity. So yeah, let's connect and get to know each other.